Okay, we're calling to order a continuation of regularly scheduled council meeting. And let's go right into roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Nichol.
Here.
Councilmember Pimentel. Here. Councilmember Brand.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Persack.
Here.
Mayor Boyles.
Here. Okay, and we're going to open it up for public communications.
Oh, there she is.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and everyone here in the chambers and at home. My name is Tracy Miller-Zarnicki, and I am a 21-year resident of El Segundo, currently serving as the chair of the city's environmental committee. Talking trash is not pretty, but it's something that we on the environmental committee have been thinking about ever since we were reconvened over 4 years ago. We've long thought about the disparity in waste removal that happens in our city, and we are grateful that it is finally, officially time to reassess our practices here in El Segundo with the municipal contract expiring later this year. To that end, I am here to ask our fellow residents to think long and hard about changes that may need to take place in our city in order to keep up with the time, and to study the numbers and facts before having a fit on social media or in a more productive way before expressing their concerns to our city council. Our committee has been talking with our Public Works Department as they research and evaluate the current state of waste hauling reality in our community. It's not the same old one truck, one can scenario back when the city made the deal to subsidize some residential service long ago. And truth be told, the city only covers single-family homes and smaller condo buildings. So what that means in today's world is other home-owning residents may pay higher mortgages and property taxes in their larger condo complexes, but do not get the city coverage. Is that really fair? Furthermore, we have long heard concerns from residents about not funding things like public safety as too high of a level as we could, or not fixing facilities as permanently as we should. And perhaps when you realize that waste hauling service is one of the costs the city has been covering, instead of spending on these other things, everyone might appreciate this time of reevaluation. Now's our chance to make it right, for residents to take more responsibility for their own messes, and to let the city money cover other things more thoroughly. Change is hard, but we must take care of our environment more than ever now. So again, I ask our fellow residents to study the numbers and facts put forth today and in future Public Works presentations on this topic, and then express their ideas and opinions based upon educated responses, not the "we've always done it that way" approach that's based on nostalgia, fear of change, and denial of reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zarnicki.
Hi, I'm Corey Zippo. I apologize for being my daughter. We had a little daycare issue today with the bottle, but she'll be well behaved. Well, let's start again. My name is Corey Zippo. I'm following Tracy, who gave an excellent speech, so it's a little embarrassing coming after Tracy, but I will try my best. I'm a new resident at, I'm not a new resident at El Segundo, but I'm newly home resident on 324 Whiting. And I'm also the vice chair of the city's environmental committee. Back in 2013 is when I originally moved to El Segundo, and we moved into a multi-housing complex off Main Street, and it was 3 units. And in that townhouse, we were in charge of our own trash, which was normal to me coming from other cities. We paid $15 a month. One of the things with our own trash bill was that we had very limited space, so there's an incentive for me to minimize my trash by either reusing or just being more simple in my lifestyle. Unfortunately, though, for our waste hauler, we didn't have recycling because it's not mandated. I believe if it's under 5 units, and we were 3 units, so our waste hauler wasn't required to provide recycling services. So earlier this year, we moved to a single-family residence. When we moved into our new home, it actually came with 3 very large trash cans, and I found out we had free trash. So one of the things that was just shocking is that I really had no incentive to reduce my trash, and the city will just keep on picking it up. We could even get more trash cans. At least that's my understanding. So one of the things is I would like to urge the city council to consider no longer subsidizing residents' trash. As Tracy mentioned, it's not fair to the multi-housing residents that already are paying for their trash. And for the single resident families, there's no incentive to reduce your trash when the city is subsidizing it. I would like to just offer that the city council make the city negotiate, I'm sorry, I'm getting all nervous now. That the city council negotiate trash let me look at my thing, I'm sorry. I'm getting so nervous having my daughter here. There's, one of the things for the city to no longer subsidize the residents by using their money from the general fund, instead negotiate a more widely accessible residential contract that is calculated for a pay what use basis. I would like to see the city go out for a competitive bid for the trash, then charge the residents as a trash utility bill similar to our water bill. I don't think that the residents will ever change their consumption habits by ordering, Amazon Prime, grocery deliveries, meal prep boxes. I mean, it's endless with the excessive waste, and they'll just keep on doing it as long as there's no incentive to reduce your trash. So if residents were charged for additional trash bins or excessive trash or recycling that doesn't fit into the allotted bins, that would make more sense. Furthermore, I understand that there's low-income residents, and for those folks, I could see that there would be a program established like Lifeline does for other utilities. Lastly, I know that manual trash pickup is expensive and inefficient. Automatic trash pickup is quicker, which means there's less idling engines. It's more stationary since the standard collecting bins are enclosed, and therefore it's safer to the employees. As for housing and population increases, I believe our current subsidized trash system is not sustainable from a financial and environmental standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zupo. Okay, seeing no more further comments, we'll go into special order business item 1, consideration and possible action to receive and file a report from Public Works and the City Solid Waste Program and Waste Collection Services, and 2, provide staff direction on negotiations of a contract extension with Republic Services and future solid waste collection services, Fiscal Impact TBD. And Mr. Carpenter, who will present on this matter?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Ken Berkman, our Director of Public Works, has been working on this issue and will present along with our consultant. This is a fairly specialized field, so we've brought in a consultant, Michelle Leonard from SES and Engineers. And just a word on the purpose of this. One of our strategic planning objectives is to communicate better. And this is a fairly significant issue that the council will be dealing with, and this workshop is seen as really a first step in starting that communications with the public and with the council on this issue. You have an hour, you have about 52 minutes for this, and we can certainly schedule more of these as necessary. Staff is looking to educate the council and the public on the status of refuse and municipal refuse, and also to try to start developing a strategy to move forward. All right?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Honorable Mayor, council members, we're here to have an opening study session, if you will, on our solid waste collection program, residential and commercial trash collections. I'd like to point out, again, as Greg mentioned, Michelle Leonard, SCS Engineers, has been selected as a result of a competitive RFP process that I conducted last year with the budget approval last year. And we also have members of Republic Services, our residential and some commercial collection provider. I'm sorry if I messed the name up. Ray Grothhouse, a general manager. Tom Baker, Area Municipal Services Director. David Yen, Division Controller. And Dawn Harris, Municipal Services Manager, who replaced Sam Pena, you might remember Sam. So briefly, overview of the topics. We'll cover the history of solid waste in our city, the residential waste collection survey, the current Republic Services agreement, and finally future options for the city. Just first part, the history, go through the residential collection, the commercial collections, and past and current and actually future legislation and compliance issues. So for a residential services contract, and I should point out, the staff report says, our code says city shall provide trash collection services to all residences. The resident is defined as a 1 or 2 unit structure, let's say. Currently, our contract from the RFP from 2011 includes 3 and 4 units as well. So essentially, since 1993, one way, shape, or form, Republic Services has been providing our residential services. Contract from 93, where they started out with Zakharov, and then in 97, that contract was extended. 98, Zakharov emerged with Republic Industries, and an agreement assigned to Consolidated Disposal Services, who's a subsidiary of Republic, in 2001, and then again in 2006, the contract was extended 5 years. And in 2011, the current contract we're in was a result of an RFP process where Republic had the lowest bid, and it was decided at that time, as mentioned, the city will no longer pay for service for multifamilies, residences greater than 4 units. And that contract, as we'll get to, is expiring this Halloween. So our residential services are provided to 3,981 units, single families, and again, multifamilies up to 4 units. And again, the code requires 2 for us at a cost of $9.88 per month per unit for a total annual value of $472,000. In additional services, which will be covered in another slide coming up, our total bill this year, $520,000. It's interesting to note that the city is one of 3 cities in California where the residents are not charged for their waste collection services. San Diego and Commerce are the other 2, and thanks to Michelle for the research that Commerce is also, I was always saying it's one of 2 with San Diego. So San Diego and Commerce. And we're the only curbside manual collection provided by Republic in the LA Orange County area. And Michelle, with her research, I believe the only other curbside manual, there are spots in South Pasadena and Hermosa that, due to logistics of collections, they do the manual collections there, but otherwise it's automated. So our services that we provide through Republic: unlimited weekly waste, where the residents provide containers, unlimited weekly recyclables, and Republic will provide 2 16-gallon or 1 32-gallon containers. We have weekly unlimited pickup of bulky items, anything, mattresses, sofas, anything that in this case 2 men can pick up and get into the truck. Green waste drop off at the city yard, not a curbside collection. They provide 2 annual cleanup weeks for our bulky items and 2 annual shredding events. They have our holiday tree collection and abandoned item collection in the public right away. Anything that I get calls on or staff get calls on, I call Republic and they go get it. City-sponsored events, they take care of collections for us at a maximum of 5. Sorry about that. And outreach that they need to do. So essentially, for all intents and purposes, residents can put out whatever they want in whatever manner they want to, and Republic will pick it up. As far as the commercial services, we have 24 licensed haulers. They serve the businesses and the multifamily units of 5 or greater. They take care of the construction and demolition, debris with the containers, and there are no reporting requirements formally in any of the licenses. So I'm going to have Michelle step up and talk a little bit about our legislation and compliance.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to meet you all and to be here today. As Ken said, we've been working very closely on this issue, and so I've learned a lot about the city, at least the city's solid waste program in the last 4 months. So in terms of legislation and compliance, there's a number of laws in existence that the city is required to comply with. Those are led by CalRecycle, which is our state resource recycling department, under Cal EPA. AB 939, you're probably familiar with. That was the one that was passed back in 1990. Said we've got to meet 50% landfill diversion by the year 2000. Statewide, we did really well. The city also is meeting compliance. I won't go through the whole history of that law, but we've really kind of changed how we count disposal, and now we reach a per capita disposal equivalent. We have a target. The city is well under that target. The target was about 44 pounds per person per day, and in the last reporting year, the city's was 14 pounds per person per day. So cities in compliance with AB 939. Then back in 2012, AB 341 came into existence, and AB 341 and the next one, AB 1826, really came about because of our state Global Warming Solutions Act, which mandated that we reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the major greenhouse gas emissions sources are landfills and the methane that comes from landfills. And so commercial recycling and commercial organics recycling were identified as opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions statewide. So beginning in 2012, businesses and multifamily units multifamily buildings with greater than 5 units that have at least 4 cubic yards, so your average dumpster of trash a week is required to recycle or to have recycling services available to them. The city is required to provide outreach and education. The hauler is required to offer those services, and the businesses and the multifamily complexes are required to take advantage of those services. And the city then reports the progress and the compliance to the state in the annual report that's submitted to CalRecycle. And then in 2016, mandatory commercial organics recycling went into effect, again, to keep those organics out of the landfill and do something else with them. And in 2017, this one was kind of phased in, recognizing that there's some challenges associated with what are we going to do with those organics. So the first tier was businesses and multifamily units or multifamily complexes greater than 5 that generated 4 cubic yards of organics per week. So not just trash, but specifically the organics. So that was a lot of like the supermarkets and restaurants and large campuses that really had a lot of organic waste. In 2019, that's going to go down to 4 cubic yards per week of trash. So it's similar to the AB 341 recycling requirement. It's basically pretty much going to cover every commercial business, as well as, again, those multifamily complexes with greater than 5 units. The city's requirements under that are similar to the recycling. The city has to identify who's covered under that, who is recycling, and provide outreach and education, make sure everybody knows what the requirements are, and report to CalRecycle on the progress the city is making in complying with that law. And that report is submitted to CalRecycle every August. Most of the businesses are complying. The challenge, of course, here in the city is that, as Ken showed you in the previous slide, there are 24 haulers in the city. It's kind of like herding cats sometimes in terms of trying to get information from them on, are their customers aware of the law? Are they recycling? Who is and who isn't? And so the city's trying, it works very hard to get that information from those haulers.
So I want to get into a little bit of background about the CalRecycle compliance status for the city. I started as your interim director in November 2016, and in February 2017, the local assistance and market development branch, the local staff, told me as a result of their 2012 to 2015 cycle review, which is every 4-year cycle, that did kind of coincide with AB 341 that Michelle talked about. They said they were referring us to the Jurisdictional Compliance Unit, JCU. I believe we're one of 10 cities in Southern California, I think. Not sure that, I don't remember if that was Southern California, the state, but for what they call gaps in our program. And gaps they define as basically things that we're not doing enough of, and that includes the mandatory commercial recycling monitoring and implementation, our residential green waste program effectiveness and oversight, our construction and demolition debris recycling program, and they wanted to see more outreach and monitoring. And so from staff's perspective, as Michelle mentioned, they put a ardent effort always into trying to get 24 haulers to respond to inquiries and get the data, and so we can come into compliance, and try to work with the state to see what we needed to do, how we needed to do it. And it was it just obviously did not work out the way we wanted to, so now we're in the JCU. So the first thing I did was to establish a positive relationship with the JCU. I invited the section manager down with his staff, and they met with me in my office, and I wanted to understand the process and what they were going to do and where they were going to be. So we got off to a good start, a good meeting. They told me they're going to start their process of quote unquote, they said living in the city. So probably since about last June, about a year, they've staff, when they can, has been talking to our haulers, coming down to the city, just investigating, seeing where things are going to the transfer facilities, the landfills, wherever they can go to get information about where our trash is going and what we're doing. They said they would get back to us with a report, a findings report, in about a year. I recently spoke with them probably about a month ago, and they still wanted to get to the school district. And I talked to the superintendent to give her the heads up that they were coming, so they're on board, but they're going to wait till September to when school's in session again. So we're probably looking at fall before we really find out their findings. To get more specific, Michelle was going to speak to the organic waste disposal reduction, the requirements.
So we thought that AB 1826 was a big deal, requiring businesses and large multifamily complexes to recycle organic waste. But then SB 1383 came about, and this is really the short-lived Climate Pollutant Act, again, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state. This one's going to affect everybody, and I've been in the solid waste industry for, I don't look that old, but a little over 30 years, and this one is probably the most onerous of any I've seen in probably since AB 939 back in 1980. So again, it's going to affect residential and commercial generators, and the goals are we're going to reduce the disposal of organic waste 50% by the year 2020 and 75% by the year 2025, and also by that 2025 we're going to recover 20% of edible food, which is a great thing. 40% of edible food is wasted right now in the U.S. and so, but how are we going to do that? That's the big challenge. Right now we're in the process of reviewing proposed regulations to implement SB 1383. I think the version right now is about 90 pages long. There's been a lot of workshops and a lot of public input, and which was a good thing because we all provided input and have tried to make it a little bit more palatable as we try to implement this. But basically the bottom line is that the city must provide residential and commercial organic waste collection system. There must be minimum levels of education and outreach and even monitoring of contamination, looking in carts and bins to make sure that the organics are not in with the trash. There's going to be requirements to make sure that the generators, the households, the businesses are complying with the law, as well as that the haulers are picking the material up and keeping this waste stream out of the landfill. And then, of course, the city will have to report on an annual basis in terms of how compliance is going. And the organics is everything. So it's food and it's green waste and the landscaping, but it's also paper, printed materials, and just about anything that you can think of in terms of organic waste. The next slide. The implementation and enforcement of it is going to begin in 2022. And so that's not that far away. And the reason why we're bringing it up is because, you know, any future agreement that the city is going to enter into obviously must address these requirements. Again, requirements for the haulers, perhaps requirements to help the city to comply, and of course to help the residents and the businesses to begin to comply as well. The way the regulations are reading right now, which again are in draft, but we're anticipating those will be finalized in September, is that the Cal Recycle can impose requirements on the jurisdictions. There is that potential for up to $10,000 per day fines. There's a few pages of charts of various tiers of fines, and the fines can be levied against not only the city, but also the haulers and the residents and the businesses. And then, you know, if the city isn't complying, then they can levy a corrective action plan that would set some time frames and some requirements for compliance. So as I said, it's an onerous legislation, and it's going to require efforts both by the city and the haulers, as well as the residents and the.
Thanks, Michelle. So with Republic's residential contract ending this October, I put the conversation to the Environmental Committee, and we thought of getting 5 simple questions out to the public to see what their thoughts and feelings were about our trash service. These were distributed to the residents last November, and the number of surveys sent was the 3,161 number of property owners that we found, and then as a result of returns coming back, we actually had number of surveys delivered was 3,077, and we got a response rate of 42%, or 1,300 responses back, both between the online and paper response surveys that we sent out. So our first question, how would you rate your trash collection services? And it came out that folks really like their trash services, a pretty high rating of 8 3/4 out of 10. As a little bit of a breakdown, we could see that 87% of the respondents gave their trash collection service a top rating, and only 2% gave them a poor rating. One of the things we wanted to ask, given that folks have unlimited bulky pickups, is how many would be enough? And 77% of the respondents said 3 or 4 or fewer pickups per year would be fine. As an intro to this, the intro to this question indicated that the city pays $520,000 a year out of the general fund, and at that time, before I knew Commerce, El Segundo and San Diego are the only ones that pay for their residents' trash. Based on a survey of a dozen LA County cities, residents pay about $35 per month for automated trash, recyclable, and green waste collection. The $35 came from my research with my staff, including a thorough survey that Torrance did, but it also included cities like Santa Monica and Burbank, Thousand Oaks and Los Angeles, who are all city-provided services, so that they were higher and they skewed the results. So you'll see later in the survey, through Republic's research and with Michelle's research, it's significantly lower on average, but we'll get to that. So would you be willing to pay for this service for $35 a month? And 78% of the respondents said they do not want to pay $35 a month for their trash collection services. Another question we wanted to ask was, do you want us to continue the manual or hand-tossed method of collection or switch to an automated side-loading method? And 62% preferred the manual method, and 11% preferred the automated method. Below, you can see between the online and the paper survey returns, a little bit more more support for the automated, for the online, and more support for the manual with the paper, for what that's worth. That's why that breakdown was provided. So this question added a little insight into, would they pay, and if so, what type of service would they want? So of the 23% of the respondents who said, yes, I'll pay $35 a month, 36% still said they would prefer the manual, which was a notable but slight preference over the automated service. Interestingly, of those who would pay, 36% also had no preference. And as you can see, those who said no had 5% automated and 73% who wanted the manual. So that brings us to our current Republic residential agreement. And again, this is expiring on October 31st this year. And when we got to about the year mark this past October, I reached out to then working with them, Sam Pena. But we didn't get anywhere, and it wasn't until the beginning of January that Dawn Harris told me Sam was no longer with the company, shared that they did some restructuring and reorganizing. So once we finally got the chance to meet with the team together, we had this proposal delivered to us in early April. And again, Republic Services is here to answer any questions as we get to that point in the study. So they came back with the 2-year extension of the existing manual service, no changes, for $16.95 per month per unit, for a total of $810,000 a year, and for the following year, $19.55 per month per unit, for a total of $934,000 a year. That doesn't include the other services that we mentioned. This is just for the residential trash collection per unit. They also offered a 1-year extension of the existing manual service at the $19.55 rate. I'm going to have Michelle come up to discuss the research that her company and along with Republic did for current rates around town.
So there certainly are some options moving forward. I mean, you can stay with the existing automated service or manual service you saw on the previous slide. What Republic has indicated would be the cost for that, either for a 1 or 2 year option. The other option is to look at automated collection. And I might add that that new law, SB 1383, actually talks about carts and service, and says the city can provide that collection either on a 3-cart system or a 2-cart system, or a what they call mixed waste collection. Which, but the options here, what we did was we surveyed and a long list of cities, both South Bay cities as well as a number of cities throughout LA County, to find out, well, what are the other cities doing? And I can say that of the about 14, 15 cities that we surveyed, majority, 98% of them have a 3-cart automated system. So they've got 1 cart for trash, 1 cart for recycling, and 1 cart for green waste. Typically, they are all picked up on the same day. Some of them are moving towards maybe an every other week for trash, while more of the materials go into the organics and the recycling bin. But for the most part, right now, picked up on the same day, every week, 3 different carts. There are a couple of cities, the city of Long Beach does a 2-can automated system, and that's because their trash and their green waste goes to the waste to energy facility located in the city of Long Beach. Although they too are now looking at their options for organics, as that facility is aging and its future is unsure at this point. We added a few others to this survey and actually found that The average of all of the cities that we looked into was closer to about $29 a month. And then the South Bay cities was about 23, a little bit higher than that, 23.13, but about $23, $24 a month that the other cities are paying for that automated service.
Thank you. So, Council, that's a lot to take in, but what we'd like to see and discuss, and as City Manager Carpenter said, now and in the future sessions as we need to, future options. What do we do in the near term? What do we do in the long term for our solid waste program and our solid waste collections throughout our city? Several to consider: extend our current contract for the existing services for 1 or 2 years, negotiate for a new long-term contract with Republic, including an automated 2 or 3 cart system. We could prepare the request for proposals to seek new bids for a new residential contract and seek the automated collection bids, but also the manual collection bids. And I put in the fact that if regulatory compliance can be achieved with what is upcoming for the organics. And then lastly, we think we should issue the 5-year notice of intent to franchise our commercial haulers, and you have to do it for 5 years. Whether we do it or not, we don't have to, but we definitely should put that to paper and get it out there so we're legally ready to go that route if we want to. So we're all here to answer any questions. That concludes the presentation.
Councilman Brand.
Thank you, Mayor. City Attorney, am I correct in thinking now that trash services do not need to go out to bid?
That's correct. The state law provides that that specific service does not have to go out to bid. Doesn't mean it can't, it just does not have to.
Got it. And then in 2010, we had a trash subcommittee that advised the council around this topic. That is not in existence now?
That's correct. Only the environmental committee exists now.
Okay, and then you tested in the survey, the people, the respondents contacted it, would they be willing to pay $35 a month? Why did you use $35 since all the comparisons we saw were somewhere between 20 and 25?
Right. That was my own research with my staff early on in the process, prior to hiring SCS engineers and prior to getting those numbers from, thank you, from Republic as well. So I was trying to get that to the environmental committee and get some sort of consensus to go forward with something to the public quickly.
Just for council's background, I brought this issue up in 2011, I think, when I was here for my first council stint, and I was proposing that residents pay $10 a month, which is about where we've been, right? Would you say $9.88 right now?
Correct.
Right. So Mark Hensley said if you want to do that, that's going to have to go to a vote of the people. We can't just do that up here at the council table. And so we launched it off, and we started to get pushback from the residents at the $10 level. I think it got up towards 3,000 replies that were opposed to that. I can't remember the numbers required to knock it out, but at some point, maybe 3 to 4 months into it, I just decided to walk away from it because there was such an outcry from our residents over this concept of having to pay for your trash to be picked up. It's an inalienable right here in El Segundo. That's one of the things you get for living here. That's what's in a lot of people's minds. And so I'm not surprised $35 went over like a lead balloon, because $10 did. and I suspect $1 would. Okay, I doubt if that much has changed since the survey about 7 years ago. Anyway, that's some background. We've kind of been through this before. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Pimentel, do you have a thought?
Well, that addresses one of the questions that I had, was that are we obligated, this is a city attorney question, I suspect, are we obligated to, this is a zero-sum, this is a binary decision of we opt to continue with a city-provided service, or we opt to go out to bid and put it to the residents, but a mixed model of subsidy program like the 2011 plan is not something that the council can prescribe. We can't just opt to say we want to continue, but we want a civic allocation to pay for a portion of it, but that the rest is the responsibility of an individual household.
Correct. Well, if it would be subject to a Proposition 218 process, which means you would need to send out notice to the fee payers, or the rate payers, if you will, and that if a majority of those fee payers, property owners, protest, then the city cannot impose the rate.
And then would we have to put it to a vote? Would we have to put it on a ballot issue?
No, it's a mail, kind of reverse ballot process. You mail it out to the property owners, ratepayers, and they have the option of returning it as a protest. And if more than 50% of them return it as a protest, then the rate cannot be imposed.
And is there any recourse by the council from that, or is it just a dead issue? Is that the final verdict? That
would be the final verdict.
Got it. In the estimation, and this is one that will go over to Works, is if we were to go to a franchise and consolidate, in theory, consolidate the number of providers we had on the commercial side, would that be a demonstration of good intent of compliance? Because if our methodology for that was to increase our measurables in compliance with the proposition, is that a demonstration? Is that in and of itself a value proposition?
Through the mayor, Member Pimentel, it's a astute question. I think it is something that would be viewed favorably. I can't say that factually because we haven't had the report come back from Cal Recycle yet. It's something the city attorney and I have discussed. I know, well, I would definitely think that it would greatly assist our ability to gain data, gather data from the collectors, from the haulers, and be able to report it to Cal Recycle.
I could add to this kind of a mixed question with your prior question about rates, and that is, if the city, if the city is going to franchise, then potentially the city could have to go through a Prop 218 process with those commercial property owners. And one of the things we were talking about as a potential option, which I haven't seen done quite this way, is if the city has nothing to do with the billing, does not try to impose any charges upon the haulers, is it then possible, if the haulers directly deal with the customers, that we could get outside of a Prop 218 process? I don't believe there's an exact precedent on that point, but potentially there's a downside of taking the commercial side and putting that under a franchise. If we then have to put that, the city then has to put that through a Prop 218 process, which it currently does not, because the city has nothing to do with that operation. And I would make this other point, which I know that is not a good idea on the residential side, is if the city got rid of the franchise on the residential side and people just had to go buy it, pay for their own trash, we would have no Prop 218 issue. We would have solid waste trucks going all over from 10 different companies on any day of the week, but we wouldn't have a Prop 218 process. So it's a little odd in that by franchising, it potentially triggers this Prop 218 issue.
Just want to remind the council we have about 15 minutes left before we go into our next meeting. So, Ken, can you frame up what I certainly have some comments. Can you frame up what you'd like to get out of this specifically in the next 10 to 15 minutes?
Well, I think what to do with the upcoming expiring contract with Republic is number one. And given the conversations that we're having, perhaps considering the 1 or 2 year option would be a good way to go to allow us to do the research and answer council's questions and get that long-term direction going concurrently.
So it's 2011 was the last time we went to RFP. Do I remember that
Correct.
Okay, so my thoughts are that we need to go out to RFP. I feel strongly about that. I also feel that we need to ask the residents to pay for this service, and we should not continue to say that just because it's happened before or never been done that it shouldn't be done this time around. That we're talking about $1 million, and that does not include compliance. You know, as someone that's familiar with this industry, compliance is going to be incredibly more costly and complex going forward. So that $900,000 and change does not even incorporate internal staff pressure to report. I mean, you heard it, going through bins, there's going to be significant compliance components, and there's more coming. California has been known to bring these things on, and it's not going to stop out of Sacramento. So I think we need to go to RFP. It's been 7 years. And I do think that we need to also ask the residents to pay, and we need to do a better job. Not that you didn't do a good job last time, Dr. Brand, but we need to do even better job of getting ahead of this, educating, and things have changed a bit. I'm raising kids for the second time in this town, which I've said several times, and my peer group is different this time around than it was last time. And having spoken to people who are coming here dual income, they have money, they understand the problems ahead of us as a city, they understand that 25% of our general fund budget is going to be pension expenses and liabilities alone within 5 years, they're beginning to get it. And so I think it would be irresponsible not to attempt to ask the residents to pay for this service.
So I did have one question. So with the extension for the first year at $16.95 and then second year up to $20, what would it be if we went to a full service, an automated service? That those fees aren't in here?
No, that is something we'd have to approach Republic with in direct negotiations. We talk to them and let them know that's a possibility that we might come back to them. Interestingly, if I may, Honorable Mayor, the go to RFP requires us to define what the scope of services will be. So my question is, what would those scope of services be? The same as we're doing now? And then I'd like to have Michelle answer the time frame needed, because October's too quick, I know that. And I'm wondering how far in a...
I just want to, first of all, I don't know if I totally agree. I'm not an expert in the contract process, but this is what they do in their wheelhouse every day, solid waste collection contracts for cities. They could probably draw up the unit economics on this overnight, I would think. That's my thought. The RFP process I don't know what the requirement is legally, but it hasn't been done in 7 years. I don't know why we'd wait another year or two. And I think in terms of scope, we say you can bid it however you want. One is manual, one is automated. You know your costs intrinsic in those two types of service offerings. What do you want to bring to the city?
I think the process is, as we speak, or just in the last year, it's a little more complicated, and it gets back to, again, part of the question that Councilmember Pimentel was asking is the regulatory part. If we franchise, the city franchises the commercial area, will that help? Yeah, from a regulatory standpoint, it probably does, because we get more control over it. And that pressure hasn't really existed until relatively recently. City's been in compliance with AB 939 for a long time, and that's due to some very large businesses in town, so that's not been an issue. Now we have new requirements. As part of going to an RFP, I'm not saying it couldn't be done fast. I don't know exactly what fast means, but a little more complicated in getting the haulers to determine how they will comply with all these new regulations.
I don't agree with you. They know they're lobbying in Sacramento all day long for some of these things, and opposed to others. So they know the intricacies better than anyone else about how to comply. They're having to do this already. LA has already instituted commercial haulers franchise model. So we can look to them, to Councilman Pimentel's, in terms of how that's working. I know the union groups are highly behind that. But again, I don't know why we can't attempt an RFP process. We've got 3 months, see what we get back. Worst case scenario, we go down the same path. We've got this extension opportunity in front of us, assuming Republic would still honor that. But that's
I
number
just
one.
did one recently. Now, the city took it a little, I mean, it had a time frame where it backed out, or it had more time. Potentially, we could put something together in 30 days and force a quick time response.
We were considering giving new bidders 60 days initially to respond to an RFP process at the lakes, and they had never walked the site. We're talking about a solid waste contract. They have all the numbers. So I don't know why we're making this overly complicated. Okay, and then we had to fight to get an extension of that RFP timeline to get more time for those bidders who had never walked into this, not even understanding anything about the lakes other than some financials that they had received. This is different. I don't know why we need additional time for this.
But I will say that I agree with Ken that we need to know what we're bidding.
Okay. Councilman Brand has a point.
Okay, I agree with you, Mayor, that we should go out to bid. I would like to I assume we can shift to the automated style instead of the manual without triggering a 218. Since we're paying for it as a city, we should be able to dictate the way we pick it up, okay? And remember what the survey said, Mayor, 78% no, not going to pay $35. So I'm not sure the town has changed that much. It's changing, but
I think when the town becomes better informed about some of the decisions we have ahead of us, like Hermosa Beach just outsourced fire because they can't sustain their own public safety. Again, 25% of our general fund going forward will be pension-related expenses and liabilities unless something material changes.
yeah,
Fundamental shift. We know that on the CalPERS committee, right?
we know that.
So
yeah.
I think we need to educate our residents. And again, I think we're the only city in all of LA County that does not require their residents to pay for this service.
Commerce, I guess, it doesn't, but, and I don't know what their particulars are.
No,
It's
Commerce
just,
Commerce charges, don't they?
Commerce is one of the cities that pays for residential trash service.
Okay.
And how many residents do they have?
Yeah.
Like 50 residents.
They have 50 or 75.
13,000 residents? Okay.
Oh, that's substantial. Okay.
To throw in one question about automation, would we be responsible in theory, I guess this would be part of the RFP process, but there'd be a capital expenditure for automated compliant bins, and that is probably a
Trash
I would
company
presume-
provides them.
Right.
Well, they provide it, but not for
There's a
free. I mean,
cost,
it's
right.
baked into that'll be
Well, and
baked
that's the
into
thing
to the
We should
stew.
be looking at the RFP to Dr. Brian's point, we should be looking at automation regardless if we're paying or not paying, because that we should be, from a recycle standpoint, we should be moving to automation regardless. So either if we go forward with asking the residents to pay or not, we as a city should be moving in that direction. There's an echo in this room. So I think on the RFP, we have to look at both components. And then the other thing is this, on this SB 1383, there's this can impose penalties up to $10,000 a day. Who is the watchdog for that? And is this going to be required of the city to watch it? Or is this something that the hauler catches? And how do they catch it? Are they going to have cameras on their trucks as the trash is dumped in? Like
And this already exists, doesn't it, with AB 939?
Well, AB 939 did have
It's a microphone.
$1,000 per day hammer as well, and that was on the cities. If the city did, just didn't do anything, it didn't implement programs, et cetera. I think there was only 2 cities that ever got fined, and certainly wasn't $10,000 a day. The way the legislation or the regulations are reading right now, like I said, there's potential fines on the haulers, there's potential fines on the generators, and potential fines on the city. The city will be responsible for monitoring compliance and down to looking in trash cans. Now, whether or not you put that requirement on your hauler as part of a contract, or their permit or something like that, I imagine that will be, that some of the cities will do that, similar to a lot of the cities made the haulers responsible for AB 939, reporting, et cetera. But there is quite a schedule of potential fines that are written at least into the draft regulations right now for all three parties, haulers, generators, and the city. But, you know, the main, you are going to be responsible to monitor it and to report to CalRecycle on an annual basis in terms of compliance, going down to what businesses and residents are complying and which ones are not. And so, you know, you made a great point. It is going to take staff time to do that. And that was the challenge the city's had even now with AB 341 and 1826 is, you know, with a very limited staff, it was difficult to get that information from, you know, all of the commercial haulers.
Thank you, Michelle. We have 5 minutes. Hold on,
Yeah,
Carol.
and one quick question. So do we have an estimate cost per household for moving to the automation? Because if we're going to go to 16 and change.
Doesn't matter, we're gonna go.
If I may, through the mayor, I wanted to, and the city attorney I checked with, Republic executives are here if they would like to answer any questions, or council would like to answer any questions, including that. The one thing I'd like to point out possibly is I'm going to get with Michelle and see how quickly we can put together this RFP. One of the things I would discuss with Republic is outside the 1 or 2 year, if we can't meet the October 31st date, can we do a month-to-month extension? That's something that has been done previous in council actions. It's been a 6-month extension, for example, but I know it could be available. So if anybody had any questions for Republic, I'd like to open up to
So
that.
I just want to be considerate that we have interview candidates that are going to be waiting on us at this point if we're not expeditious here. So I want to call for a vote on the RFP. And can we call on a vote, or do you want to comment on the RFP specifically?
No, I think we go for bid.
Okay.
I mean, it goes up. We're talking about our price increasing by 55%.
Yeah.
I don't really think there's anything we need to discuss in this moment, because in any business you're in, if something goes up by 55%, you got to look around. If that is the going rate, then that's going rate. But the only way we get that answer as a municipality is by going out for RFP. But before we do that, because we can probably make motions to take further action as well, to Dr. Brand's point, I'm with you. I think when I asked Joe Lilio what it would cost to do a Prop 218 process vote, it's like $12,000 is roughly what he had said it would cost. And maybe Greg, you can correct me on that. But I think we do need to put it out, because I do not think that this ultimately is on us. We are representatives of our constituents within this city, but the residents of the city need to speak out. And if they're going to vote back in with protest and say, no, we are not paying for our trash, you, the city, are going to continue to pay for the trash. That will play a role in what direction we go in with this RFP. And my other point that I wanted to make is I think we have to see this as an opportunity. Trash collection is changing. It's changing in 2 years. No one right now collects their food waste. Not in our city, but in many other cities they do. The kids at Center Street do, I can tell you that. My son keeps asking me where my third trash can is. People are going to have to learn how to change. So change is coming. Whether they like it or not, this is not us. This is not the five of us making this choice. So I think we use that as an opportunity to set a new example to, here, this is the new norm. Sorry, thank the state of California. So I would move to put this out for an RFP and for us to give specific direction as to what we want to see in that RFP. And I would also want to include in that motion that we put out the Prop 218 process vote.
Maybe we split them. To go with the first, let's go for the RFP first. So you had a motion to go out to bid, competitive bid. I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. And then the second motion?
Can I just briefly interject? Before you can go out to the Prop 218 vote, I think you need the proposals so you know what the rate is.
Right.
So the process would normally be you do the RFP, you get the proposals, you know what the rate is, and you have that rate so that you present it to your residents.
Okay, back to Councilmember Pimentel's point. Could we not go out to a 218 vote with a cost to be $20 per residence? And if we go out to RFP and there's anything above it, then we wear that cost?
Not to exceed or something?
Yeah, not to exceed a certain cost.
You could do that.
And because maybe this is a two-step process where the next 5 years we subsidize. After that, as you say, like, your peer group is changing.
Right.
Well, that means that it's going to change again in another 5 to 10 years.
Right.
So
Like that. Is that your motion?
I would like to make a motion to go out to a Prop 218 process vote with a fee for trash collection to the residents not to exceed $20 per household
I'll second that. All in favor?
per month.
Aye.
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 No.
Okay. 4-1. Right on time. We have to thank you, Republic, for being here. Sorry we didn't get an opportunity to address you at the podium. And thank you for all your years of service. And
We hope to do
potentially
business
continued
together.
as well. Yes, thank you.